This is the most incredible story in football history. A tale of unfulfilled potential and defiant underdogs, driven on by tragedy to triumph on the international stage. My name is Gareth of 90+1, and this is the remarkable story of Zambia's 2012 AFCON success and the tragic events that inspired it. In the late 80s, a golden generation was being birthed in African football. When Zambia defeated Italy 4-0 at the 1988 Olympics, the entire world started to take notice. A hat-trick from Chipolopolo was enough to get him scouted by PSV to play alongside Romario. Chipolopolo were eventually defeated by West Germany, but many felt they were on the verge of becoming the greatest African team of all time. In 1990, Zambia won bronze at AFCON with a squad where all but 4 players were under the age of 25. 2 years later, they were only just knocked out by eventual winners Ivory Coast in extra time. By 1993, the team had matured, and the entirety of Africa expected Zambia's golden generation to win AFCON and qualify for the 1994 World Cup. But then, disaster struck. On the evening of April 27th, 1993, a plane carrying the Zambian national team burst into flames and went down just off the shore of Libreville, Gabon. Chipolopolo were on their way to their first World Cup qualifying match against Senegal. Almost the entire golden generation, with some players as young as 18 years old, were on board. Along with the chairman of the Zambian FA, team manager, coaching staff, a doctor, a journalist, and 5 crew members. All 30 people on board sadly passed away. The exact cause for the crash is still unknown. One thing that is known is that the plane was not fit to be flying. But with budgets already stretched beyond their limits, the flight went ahead anyway. A memorial service was held where 100,000 people paid their respects as a week of national mourning was observed in Zambia. In the weeks after the crash, trials were held for players from local leagues as Zambia had to almost completely rebuild their team. A few key players were not on the flight. Charles Musonda was having knee surgery in Europe. The injury led to the end of his career, but saved his life. Meanwhile, Andrew Tembo almost boarded the flight, but was told to go home at the last minute. Star player Chipolopolo was also not on the plane, as he was making his own way to the match from the Netherlands. The new team was to be built around him, and King Kalu delivered, scoring an iconic free kick as Chipolopolo won their first match back, a 2-1 victory over Morocco. In spite of the tragedy, Zambians started dreaming of a first ever World Cup in 1994. Alas, they fell 1 win short of qualifying with a controversial loss away at Morocco. Sunderland legend Ian Porterfield was named manager for AFCON 1994 and guided the Copper Bullets all the way to the final, where again they fell at the final hurdle, losing to Nigeria's star-studded golden generation. A bronze medal at AFCON in 1996 was another remarkable achievement given the circumstances. However, as the golden generation became known as the lost generation, Zambians were left to wonder what could have been. As the years went by, the footballing world forgot all about Zambia's lost golden generation. But one man refused to forget, Chipolopolo. The man who lost not just his teammates but his friends in the crash was elected as the president of the Zambian FA in 2008. After his generation were robbed of the chance, King Kalu was desperate to build a new generation who could bring glory to his country. He hired coaches who would invest in the youth, most notably Hervé Renard, who guided the Copper Bullets to a tight AFCON quarter-final loss on penalties to Nigeria. Going into AFCON 2012, Zambia had their best team on paper since 1996. However, they were still well short of Africa's top dogs and weren't even considered dark horses for the tournament. But they shocked African football in their first match against Senegal, the same team that the lost golden generation were travelling to play against when their plane went down. With this extra motivation, Chipolopolo stormed into a 2-0 lead within 20 minutes. They had to fight to defend that lead, but saw the game out for a 2-1 victory. In their second match, Zambia once again showed spirit, coming from behind twice to draw 2-2 with Libya, before a 1-0 victory against Equatorial Guinea in their final match secured top spot in the group. And after a convincing 3-0 win against Sudan in the quarterfinals, manager Hervé Renard set about instilling a belief in his players that it was their fate to win this AFCON. See, this tournament was being co-hosted by Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, with the final set to be played in Libreville, the same city where the Golden Generation lost their lives in 1993. But the odds were stacked against Chipolopolo, as their semi-final opponents were tournament favourites Ghana, fresh off their impressive 2010 World Cup. The Zambian players sat in and fought hard, believing that as long as they could keep a clean sheet, one opportunity would arise. And then a hero announced himself. Every international tournament has an overlooked player who makes a name for himself. It was James Rodriguez at the 2014 World Cup, Hal Robson-Kanu at Euro 2016, Roger Milla at Italia 90. In 2010, you had Diego Forlan for Uruguay and Asamoah Gyan for Ghana. Well, AFCON 2012 was Emanuel Mayuka's tournament. After scoring the goal which qualified Zambia for the tournament, he started on fire with a crucial goal against Senegal. Another goal and an assist in the next match against Libya had Mayuka on course for the Golden Boot. Back in 1993, Kelvin Mutale was seen as the future of Zambian football. The young striker who scored 12 goals in 10 games for Chipolopolo was one of the golden generation who lost his life in the plane crash. And Mayuka was seen as the next Mutale, a young striker bursting onto the scene, destined to bring glory to Zambian football. Of course, other players were important. Captain Christopher Katongo led by example, scoring some vital goals. Goalkeeper Kennedy Mwena was also exceptional, single-handedly keeping the Copper Bullets in some games with some crucial saves. But Mayuka popped up late in the semi-final against Ghana to score a brilliant goal and put Zambia into the final. And it was clear that AFCON 2012 was his tournament. The final would be Zambia's first game in Gabon, having played the rest of their matches in Equatorial Guinea. And it was their first time in Libreville, so of course the players had to pay tribute to their fallen heroes, in a beautiful ceremony on the beach near the crash site in the Atlantic Ocean. The players and staff sung the same song that was performed at the memorial service back in 1993, a hymn that had become a unifying anthem for the players throughout the tournament. And ahead of the final, Kalusha Bwalia said, "It's not going to be 11 versus 11 out there, as we will have 11 ghosts on our side." However, their opponents were arguably the most stacked squad in African football history. Didier Drogba, Yaya Toure, Kolo Toure. The best spine that the continent had ever seen, supported by top players like Gervinho, Wilfred Bony, Cheick Tiote and Solomon Kalou. But for all of Côte d'Ivoire's individual quality, Zambia had something to match it. The undying belief that victory was simply their fate. The game was tight, but that belief was tested when Isaac Chansa brought down Gervinho in the box. Didier Drogba stepped up, and surely he would not miss. But then he blasted the ball over the bar, and it seemed that fate was on Zambia's side after all. Chipolopolo continued to fight as the game finished 0-0 after extra time and went to penalties. Zambia were now closer than they had ever been before. The shootout was unbelievably tense because nobody was missing. Drogba scored, Mayuka scored, Wilfred Bony scored, even Zambia's goalkeeper Kennedy Mwena scored. The game was tied at 7-7. And that's when Kolo Toure stepped up and had his penalty saved by Mwena. The Zambian players and staff, one kick away from glory, got down on their knees and began singing the same hymn they had sung at the beach and that was sung all the way back in 1993. Rainford Kalaba stepped up and skied the ball way over the bar. Everyone was shocked as doubts surely started to creep in for perhaps the first time. But after Gervinho then sliced his penalty wide, Stopila Sinzu stepped up and had the chance to realise Zambia's destiny. Players were again down on their knees as their prayers turned back to the same song they had been singing all tournament. And this time, with Sinzu also singing along, he smashed the ball into the back of the net to win Zambia their first ever African Cup of Nations. As Christopher Katongo lifted the AFCON trophy mere miles away from where their heroes had fallen, the nation of Zambia could finally celebrate. This group of players may not have been considered a golden generation, but they were the generation who delivered gold. However, it is very true that the lost golden generation played a huge part in this victory, as everyone involved acknowledged that this would not have been possible without the players of 2012 harnessing the spirit of 1993. And there you have it, for me, probably the most incredible story in football history. And of course, rest in peace to all of those mentioned in this video. Because for all this is an incredible story that feels like it couldn't even be a Hollywood script because it's too unbelievable, this was real life. The people who passed away are now honoured at Heroes Acre, just outside of Heroes Stadium in Zambia. Thank you so much for watching. I have so many more incredible stories that I can't wait to tell on this channel, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those out. But for now, I'll see you next time.